Emancipation for the Camera, Why Kareem Marcelle's Facebook post is Deceitful, Hypocritical, and Disingenuous, an editorial by Professor Wall Street. Every Emancipation Day, a certain kind of PNM politician rediscovers his African identity, mounts his soapbox, and points the finger at everyone but himself. This year, it is Kareem Marcelle, Member of Parliament for Laventille West, warning of a growing disrespect towards African Emancipation Day and African people from certain citizens and organizations. It is a stirring performance. It is also deceitful, hypocritical, and disingenuous from top to bottom. Because the man decrying disrespect for African people represents a party that held power for 10 unbroken years, from 2015 to 2025, and left the descendants of the enslaved in his own constituency exactly where it found them, poor, neglected, and used as a backdrop for speeches like this one. Marcelle wants a fight about symbolism so that nobody asks him about substance. Here are 10 reasons why Marcelle's post should be seen for what it is. 1. He weaponizes emancipation to attack others while hiding his own party's record. Marcelle frames the day as a battle against certain citizens and organizations who supposedly disrespect African people. It is a classic misdirection. By manufacturing an external enemy, he steers the conversation away from the only question that matters on Emancipation Day. What did his own PNM government actually do for the descendants of the enslaved during the last 10 years in power and the many other years? The answer is why he needs the distraction. 2. His party's great achievement was a name change and nothing more. When Dr. Keith Rowley renamed Emancipation Day African Emancipation Day, Marcelle treats it as a profound act of respect, but a name is not a policy. Adding the word African cost nothing, delivered nothing, and changed not a single life in Laventille or Morvant. If that is the crowning accomplishment of a decade in office, it is an indictment, not a boast. Real emancipation is measured in land, jobs, and dignity, not in the wording of a public holiday. 3. He calls African organizations spineless, the very people his party failed. Marcelle brands African groups spineless and compromised for staying silent, the nerve of it. These are the very organizations, including the Emancipation Support Committee, that his government had 10 years and more to empower and chose not to. Did the PNM grant them land? Did it build them an economic base? Did it fund genuine cultural and community development? If the movement is weakened today, the party that governed for a decade owns that outcome. Marcelle insults the injured and calls it courage. 4. He is silent on the poverty that deepened under his party's watch. Here is the fact Marcelle will not put in a Facebook post. Black people living below the poverty line in Trinidad and Tobago climbed to 26.3% during the PNM's 2015 to 2025 tenure, after being only 17.3% under the Kamla Persad Bissessa-led People's Partnership, a whopping 52% increase, which was the highest level in the nation history. A leader who genuinely cared about African people would lead with that emergency, not with a quarrel about African wear. His silence on the material collapse of the people he claims to champion is the loudest thing in his entire post. 5. He confuses culture with liberation to avoid talking about economics. Marcelle asks whether African people can just be allowed to dress how we want. Of course they can and should. But notice the sleight of hand. He reduces emancipation to clothing and remembrance precisely because those cost his party nothing. Frederick Douglass and every ancestor he invokes understood that freedom without economic power is incomplete. Marcelle offers the pageantry of emancipation while his party withheld its substance. There's a quote that states, "A race that's taught to hate itself and love the world would become its own oppressor." And that's exactly what has happened to the Black PNM supporters. 6. He accuses others of watering down celebrations his own party diluted. This is the purest hypocrisy in the post. Marcelle rails against those who supposedly watered down emancipation. Yet it was the PNM that reduced a decade of possibility to a symbolic prefix. Who truly watered it down? Citizens raising honest questions about economic justice, or a government that swapped land, jobs, and empowerment for a single adjective? Marcelle projects his own party's emptiness onto everyone else. 7. He represents Laventille West and cannot point to what changed there. Marcelle is the MP for Laventille West, part of the PNM's historic heartland of Morvant and Laventille. After 10 years of his party in government and many more, those communities remain among the most dilapidated in the country. If emancipation means anything, it means lifting your own people out of hardship and bondage. Marcelle had the platform, the party in power, and the mandate. What concretely improved in his constituency? The question answers itself, which is why he would rather talk about who wears what. 8. He exploits a real and painful history as a shield for political failure. The abolition of slavery on August 1st, 1833 is sacred history, and the trauma of it is real. Fact check: no, Kareem, the Slavery Abolition Act was not passed on August 1st, 1833. The timeline is August 28, 1833. The Slavery Abolition Act 1833 received royal assent after being passed by the British Parliament. August 1st, 1834. The act came into effect, beginning the legal abolition of slavery throughout most of the British Empire. That is exactly why using it as a partisan shield is so cynical. Marcelle drapes himself in the suffering of the ancestors to deflect scrutiny from the living, the people of Laventille and Morvant, who are still waiting for the economic emancipation his party promised and never delivered. He honors the dead to avoid answering to the living. What happened to the $100 million Raouli promised Laventille and environs? 9. He picks a culture war because he cannot win an argument about results. Every grievance in the post, comparisons to indentureship, debates about African wear, the framing of national unity, is a culture war distraction. These fights generate heat, outrage, and shares, and they conveniently require no accounting for policy. A politician confident in his record runs on that record. A politician without one starts a quarrel about symbols. Marcelle chose the quarrel. 10. He mistakes performance for leadership. In the end, Marcelle's post is emancipation for the camera. It says all the right words, strikes all the righteous poses, and demands respect for African people, while offering those people nothing but more words. Leadership would have used this Emancipation Day to reckon honestly with a decade of PNM failure in the very communities he represents. Performance uses it to blame others. Marcelle chose performance. In conclusion, so let us be clear on this Emancipation Day. No one is disrespecting African people by asking hard questions. The disrespect is a government that governed for 10 years and more and left its own strongholds in poverty and disrepair, then sent an MP to Facebook to blame certain citizens for noticing. Kareem Marcelle and his PNM party should be ashamed. If they truly revered emancipation, they had a decade in power and many more to deliver land, enterprise, jobs and dignity to Laventille, Mavant, and the Emancipation Support Committee. They delivered a prefix. The descendants of the enslaved deserve more than a renamed holiday and a lecture about their wardrobe. They deserve the economic emancipation the PNM promised and refused to provide. Until Marcelle can answer for that, his post is not a defense of African people. It is a costume, worn once a year for the cameras and put away by August 2nd.